The champagne glasses sparkled under the golden chandeliers, laughter echoing across the grand ballroom. Adrian Cole stood in the center, his arm wrapped tightly around Vanessa, the glamorous young model he had chosen after discarding his wife. His smug smile said it all. Tonight was his night. He had wealth, he had power, and he had a new woman to flaunt. But beneath that smile lurked a darker motive. Adrian wasn't satisfied with moving on. No, he wanted to crush his ex-wife completely. To him, Emma Lawson wasn't just a memory. She was an embarrassment, a stain he wanted erased in front of the city's most influential people. That was why he had sent her the invitation, not as a gesture of civility, but as a cruel trap. "Wait until they see her," Adrian whispered to Vanessa, his voice dripping with arrogance. "A poor, worn-out woman in a cheap dress. They'll laugh, and I'll stand here, untouchable, while she drowns in shame." Vanessa giggled, resting her head on his shoulder. "She'll regret ever showing her face here." Guests circled around them, toasting Adrian for his success, oblivious to the poison behind his charm. Every detail of the gala was carefully staged. The music, the wine, the flashing cameras. All of it built toward one cruel climax, Emma walking through those doors, vulnerable and humiliated. But the truth Adrian didn't know? Emma had changed. The woman he had cast aside wasn't coming tonight to beg or to weep. Somewhere far from the glittering chandeliers, Emma Lawson was preparing for the same gala, her heart pounding, her hands trembling, but her eyes burning with something fierce. For the first time since her divorce, she wasn't walking in alone. Because by her side would be a man no one expected. A man powerful enough to silence every laugh in the room with a single glance. And when those ballroom doors opened, Adrian would realize his perfect plan was about to collapse in the most devastating way. Emma Lawson used to believe in fairy tales. She believed that love could conquer hardship, that a good heart was enough to build a home, and that the man she married would protect her no matter what storms came their way. For years, she clung to that belief, even as cracks appeared in her marriage to Adrian Cole. When Emma first met Adrian, she was 24, working as an elementary school teacher in a small public school on the edge of the city. Her salary was modest, her life simple, but her spirit was bright. Adrian swept in with his sharp suits, ambitious smile, and promises of a future filled with success. To Emma, he seemed like a dream. He told her she was different, real compared to the shallow women in his world. She believed every word. They married quickly, and for a while, Emma felt like the luckiest woman alive. But as Adrian climbed the social ladder, his hunger for wealth and recognition grew unbearable. The humble woman he once praised became, in his eyes, a liability. Her simple dresses, her quiet life, her refusal to play the role of a trophy wife, everything about her began to irritate him. When she became pregnant, Emma thought it would heal their fragile bond. Instead, it drove him further away. He complained about money, mocked her for not being polished enough, and spent more nights out than home. The final blow came when she discovered Vanessa, a younger, flashier woman who fed Adrian's ego and flattered his ambitions. Emma still remembered the night he ended it. No compassion, no hesitation, just a cold declaration. "You don't belong in my world. I need someone who can stand beside me, not drag me down." He packed her bags, pushed her out of the life they had built, and flaunted Vanessa the very next week. Left with nothing but a broken heart and the weight of shame, Emma struggled to rebuild her life. She rented a tiny apartment, worked extra shifts, tutoring children, and quietly raised her son. The world assumed she had disappeared, just another discarded woman left behind by a rising star. And in many ways, Emma felt invisible. But invisibility gave her something unexpected: resilience. Each night she rocked her baby to sleep, whispering promises that their lives would be better. Each morning she looked in the mirror and reminded herself that she was still here, still fighting. So when Adrian's invitation arrived, a golden card embossed with his name, Emma froze. At first she thought it was a mistake. Why would he want her at a gala filled with his new allies and his mistress? But then the truth became clear. He wanted to break her again, this time publicly. Emma nearly tore the invitation in half, but something inside her stopped her. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was defiance, maybe it was the quiet voice that said, "Enough." For too long she had lived in the shadow of humiliation. Maybe it was time to face him, not as the weak woman he left behind, but as the woman she had become. Still, fear gnawed at her. She didn't have money for gowns or diamonds. She didn't have a powerful name to shield her. She only had herself. And in a world like Adrian's, that wasn't enough. Or so she thought, until fate placed a stranger in her path. A man who looked at her not with pity, but with respect. A man whose very presence could shake the walls Adrian thought were unbreakable. And when Emma realized she didn't have to walk into that gala alone, everything began to change. The gala was the kind of event Adrian Cole lived for. The chandeliers sparkled like frozen fireworks, and the air carried the sweet mix of champagne and expensive perfume. Every corner of the ballroom shimmered with wealth, crystal glasses, velvet drapes, and the soft hum of an orchestra. This was no ordinary evening. It was the annual Bright Horizons Charity Gala, where the city's most powerful gathered to see and be seen. Adrian had been preparing for weeks. He wanted tonight to be a statement, not just of his success, but of his triumph over the woman he had left behind. He adjusted the cufflinks on his tailored tuxedo, each gold edge reflecting the light, and glanced at Vanessa. She was radiant in a scarlet gown, her curves designed to draw every eye in the room. A diamond necklace glittered around her throat, a gift Adrian had purchased more for the effect than affection. She loved it anyway. To her, being draped in wealth meant she had won. As they walked in, whispers followed them. "That's Adrian Cole," someone murmured. "He's the one expanding into luxury real estate." Another voice added, "And that must be Vanessa. Stunning, isn't she?" Adrian thrived on it. Every glance, every hushed compliment, every nod of approval fueled his ego. He guided Vanessa toward the center of the room, claiming his place among CEOs, investors, and politicians. "Adrian, you look like the man of the hour," one of his associates said, clapping him on the back. "And this must be the famous Vanessa. You've upgraded." Adrian smirked, not even bothering to hide his satisfaction. Life has a way of rewarding ambition. Vanessa leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear. "Everyone's looking at us," she whispered. "They're jealous. You've never looked more powerful." He kissed her hand dramatically, making sure the photographers nearby captured the moment. This was exactly what he wanted, to rewrite the narrative. No one would remember Emma Lawson, the plain school teacher he once married. After tonight, she would be nothing more than a pitiful shadow compared to the dazzling image he now presented. But Adrian's cruelty didn't end with ignoring Emma. He wanted her humiliation to be the evening's entertainment. He had told Vanessa about his plan, how he had invited Emma just to expose her poverty and weakness. Vanessa had giggled, thrilled to play a role in his cruel theater. "Do you really think she'll show up?" she asked earlier that evening while he adjusted his tie in the mirror. "She will," Adrian had replied with icy certainty. "She can't resist. And when she does, she'll see what she lost, what she'll never have again." Now, standing in the center of the glittering ballroom, Adrian raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he declared. Guests clinked their glasses, their laughter echoing under the high ceiling. Vanessa leaned against him, her smile sharp and triumphant. But not everyone was convinced. In the crowd, a few older businessmen exchanged skeptical glances. They remembered Emma, the quiet woman who had once stood loyally at Adrian's side. There had been something genuine about her, something money couldn't buy. Still, they said nothing. Adrian's arrogance was the flavor of the night. He scanned the room, anticipation thrumming in his veins. Every tick of the clock brought him closer to the moment he craved, Emma walking in, fragile and broken, proving to the world that he had risen while she had fallen. Adrian smoothed his tuxedo jacket, certain his stage was set. He didn't know that fate had prepared a script far crueler than the one he imagined. Because when those ballroom doors finally opened, it wouldn't be shame on Emma's face, but shock on his. The envelope lay on the small wooden table in Emma Lawson's apartment like a poisonous snake waiting to strike. Its gold-embossed edges gleamed under the dim lamp, mocking her. She had recognized Adrian's handwriting immediately, the bold strokes of a man who believed the world belonged to him. For hours, she had ignored it, moving around her tiny kitchen, folding her son's clothes, preparing lesson plans for her tutoring job. But no matter what she did, her eyes kept drifting back to the invitation. Finally, with trembling fingers, she tore it open. Her breath caught. It was an invitation to the Bright Horizons charity gala. His gala. The same night where Adrian would stand proudly beside Vanessa, parading her as though she were some kind of prize, and he wanted Emma there. The words swam on the page. "We would be honored by your presence." Honored? Emma almost laughed. Adrian had never honored her, not once. He had discarded her like yesterday's news, leaving her to raise their son alone while he climbed higher into the glittering world of wealth. Emma knew why he had invited her. He wanted her humiliation to be public. He wanted her to walk into that ballroom in her simple dress, her tired eyes, her empty hands, and watch the entire city laugh at her. Her heart ached, torn between rage and despair. A part of her wanted to rip the card to shreds, to burn it and never look back. Why walk into a trap? Why give him what he wanted? But another part of her, the part that had grown stronger since Adrian left, whispered differently. Why should you hide? Hadn't she endured enough shame and silence? Maybe it was time to face him, not to win, not to prove anything, but to reclaim herself. She looked around her tiny apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the secondhand furniture, the stack of unpaid bills. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She had survived. She had built a life out of nothing. And though the world saw her as a failure, she knew she was stronger than Adrian ever believed. Still, fear clung to her. What would she wear? How would she walk into that room filled with silk gowns and diamond necklaces? She imagined their whispers. That's her? The ex-wife? Poor thing. The thought made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. Emma placed the invitation back on the table and pressed her hands to her face. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough. Her son's soft cry from the bedroom broke the silence. She rushed to him, scooping his tiny body into her arms. His eyes blinked up at her, innocent and trusting. In that moment, Emma made a silent vow. She wouldn't let him grow up thinking his mother was weak. She wouldn't let Adrian write her story. Emma kissed her baby's forehead and whispered, "Maybe it's time." But deep down she wondered, was she walking into a battlefield she couldn't win? Could a poor teacher, discarded and forgotten, really stand tall in a room built to destroy her? She didn't know yet. But fate was already placing someone in her path who would change everything. The following afternoon, the city was alive with its usual chaos. Honking taxis, flashing billboards, hurried footsteps echoing across concrete. Emma walked briskly down the street, clutching her worn tote bag. She had spent the morning at the library tutoring children, but her mind was elsewhere. The invitation still haunted her, sitting on her kitchen table like a dare she couldn't ignore. She ducked into a small cafe, hoping for a moment of quiet. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries calmed her nerves, at least for a moment. She ordered the cheapest item on the menu, a plain tea, and settled into a corner booth with her notebook. But the words blurred. Instead of lesson plans, she saw the glittering chandeliers of the gala, the cruel smile on Adrian's face, the mocking laughter of Vanessa. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" Emma looked up, startled. A man stood before her, tall and impeccably dressed, his presence commanding without a word. His suit was tailored to perfection, his dark hair neatly combed back, his eyes sharp yet strangely kind. "Oh no, please," Emma stammered, sliding her bag aside. He sat across from her with effortless grace. For a while, they shared the quiet. He sipped his espresso, scrolling briefly through his phone, while Emma tried not to feel out of place. There was something about him, an air of authority that made even the hum of the cafe seem to bend around him. "You seem troubled," he said suddenly, his voice deep, smooth, and calm. Emma blinked. It's nothing." He tilted his head, studying her carefully. People don't stare at the same page for 10 minutes when it's nothing. Heat rushed to Emma's cheeks. She closed her notebook quickly. "You don't know me." The man's lips curved into the faintest smile. "True, but I know the look of someone carrying a burden. I've carried it myself." Something in his tone disarmed her. Against her better judgment, she found herself speaking. She didn't reveal everything, only that she had been invited to an event she dreaded, one that felt like a trap. She didn't mention Adrian by name, but her voice shook with the weight of humiliation she feared. The man listened without interrupting, his eyes never leaving hers. When she finished, she expected judgment or pity. Instead, he leaned forward. "Then don't walk in alone," he said simply. Emma froze. "What?" You said it yourself. This event is designed to break you, so don't face it as if you're already defeated. He set his cup down gently. Go with someone who can make them think twice before they laugh. She frowned, confused. And who exactly would that be? The man extended his hand across the table. Alexander Knight. Emma's breath caught. The name was familiar, impossibly familiar. Even in her modest world, she had read it in the news. A billionaire investor, a man who turned companies into empires with a single decision. He was known for his ruthlessness in boardrooms and his mystery in social circles. And here he was, sitting across from her in a simple cafe. Emma hesitated. Why? Why would someone like you care about someone like me? For the first time, his expression softened. Because I know what it feels like to be underestimated. And I don't like seeing injustice paraded as entertainment. Emma's heart pounded. The idea seemed absurd, walking into Adrian's gala with Alexander Knight by her side. The thought alone felt like something out of a dream. But Alexander's gaze was steady, unwavering. If you want to face them, Miss Lawson, you shouldn't face them alone. Let me help. And in that instant, Emma realized her story was no longer hers alone. It had collided with a force powerful enough to shatter Adrian's cruel game. For days, Emma wrestled with the impossible choice. She had Alexander's offer echoing in her mind, but fear still clung to her heart. The thought of stepping into that glittering ballroom where Adrian ruled like a king made her stomach twist. What if she failed? What if everyone laughed anyway? Yet Alexander's words lingered. Don't walk in alone. 3 nights before the gala, she found herself outside an upscale boutique, the kind she had never dared enter. Its windows gleamed with gowns that looked like they belonged to another world. Emma almost turned away, but then she saw him, Alexander, waiting calmly by the entrance. I thought you might change your mind, he said, his voice steady. But I'm glad you didn't. Emma lowered her gaze. I don't belong in a place like this. Alexander stepped closer, his tone gentle but firm. Emma, the only one who ever told you that was Adrian, and he was wrong. Inside, racks of silk and velvet stretched before her. She touched the fabrics hesitantly, her calloused fingers brushing against textures she had only seen in magazines. Sales associates moved quickly at Alexander's nod, bringing gowns of every shade. At first, Emma felt awkward, standing in front of the mirror in dresses too extravagant, too far from her simple life. But Alexander never looked at her with mockery. His eyes held something different. Respect, admiration, even awe. Try this one, he suggested, handing her a gown the color of midnight. Its fabric shimmered faintly under the light, as though stitched with stars. When she stepped out of the fitting room, silence fell. The associates gasped softly. Even Emma struggled to recognize herself. The gown hugged her figure elegantly, flowing into a graceful train. Her hair, once always tied back for convenience, was styled into soft waves that framed her face. Makeup highlighted her eyes, revealing the quiet strength she had hidden for years. Emma stared at the mirror, tears pricking at her eyes. I don't look like me. Alexander's voice was low, almost reverent. No, you look like the woman you were always meant to be. For the first time in years, Emma stood taller. She didn't see the poor, discarded ex-wife. She saw a queen in the making. The final touch came from Alexander himself. From a velvet box, he revealed a pair of sapphire earrings. These belonged to my mother, he explained. She wore them on the night she faced her greatest challenge. Tonight, they're yours. Emma hesitated, overwhelmed. I can't accept something so precious. You can, he replied softly, because you're about to walk into that room and remind them all that dignity is priceless. Emma touched the earrings, her resolve hardening. She wasn't going to the gala to win Adrian back, or to prove herself to Vanessa. She was going for her son, for every night she had cried in silence, for every day she had fought to survive. As she left the boutique with Alexander by her side, heads turned. Pedestrians stopped to stare, whispering about the mysterious woman who radiated power and grace. Emma felt a spark inside her, a flame she thought Adrian had extinguished. For the first time since her marriage ended, she didn't feel invisible. And when the gala doors opened, she would no longer be the woman Adrian expected to humiliate. She would be the woman he would never forget. The Bright Horizons gala shimmered like a jewel box. Golden chandeliers cast soft light across velvet drapes, and the clinking of crystal glasses mixed with the elegant swell of violins. The city's elite crowded the ballroom. CEOs in sharp tuxedos, politicians in tailored suits, socialites draped in couture gowns worth more than most people's homes. It wasn't just a fundraiser, it was a performance of power. And at the center of it all stood Adrian Cole. He thrived under the spotlight. Every handshake, every photograph, every forced laugh fed his ego. His tuxedo was flawless, his watch gleaming beneath the lights. Vanessa clung to his arm, her scarlet gown daring and deliberate. Together, they were a portrait of ambition and vanity. "Adrian, you've outdone yourself," one guest praised, lifting his glass. Adrian smirked. "Excellence is expected, I simply deliver." Laughter followed, shallow and rehearsed. Vanessa leaned closer, whispering into his ear, "Everyone's looking at us. They envy you." Adrian's eyes glinted. "Let them. Tonight, no one will forget my name." But beneath his charm, a darker satisfaction simmered. He wasn't waiting for applause. He was waiting for Emma. The invitation had been his cruelest stroke. Bait dangled for the woman he once called wife. He imagined her arriving in a tired dress, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. He imagined the whispers spreading like wildfire. "That's her? The ex-wife? Poor thing." He relished the thought. Emma's humiliation would be his final victory, erasing her completely from his story. Vanessa, sipping champagne, asked casually, "Do you think she'll come?" Adrian's smile curved like a blade. "Oh, she'll come. She won't be able to resist, and when she does, the room will devour her." Around them, the orchestra swelled. Cameras flashed. A politician clapped Adrian on the back, declaring him the man of the hour. Investors leaned in, eager to ride the wave of his growing empire. To the crowd, Adrian was flawless. But behind every congratulatory smile, there lingered whispers of his ruthless climb, of bridges burned and hearts discarded. Still tonight, those whispers were drowned out by champagne bubbles and applause. The master of ceremonies took the stage, welcoming guests and praising Adrian's generosity. Vanessa preened, soaking in the admiration, her smile sharpened with triumph. She adored the spectacle, the way people's eyes slid over her curves, envying her position at Adrian's side. But not everyone was convinced. At the far edge of the ballroom, an older woman leaned to her companion. "I remember his ex-wife," she murmured. "Quiet girl, but kind. She never belonged in this circus." Her companion shrugged. "She'll stay away. No one survives that kind of fall." Yet the doors remained a looming promise. Every tick of the clock tightened Adrian's anticipation. He glanced toward the entrance again and again, each time imagining Emma's broken figure crossing the threshold. Finally, he raised his glass high, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Tonight is about new beginnings, about leaving the past behind." Applause erupted, Vanessa kissing his cheek for the cameras. Adrian's chest swelled. Yes, tonight was his night. But as he basked in the glow of his triumph, he didn't see the ripple moving through the crowd. Heads turning, whispers rising, anticipation thickening. The orchestra paused on a delicate note. The great doors began to open, the golden light spilling in, and in that instant, Adrian's perfect script began to unravel. The great double doors of the ballroom creaked open, and silence fell like a curtain. Or a heartbeat. The orchestra faltered, the violins hanging mid-note. Every head turned toward the entrance, curiosity sparking like wildfire. And then they saw her. Emma Lawson. But not the Emma they remembered. Not the timid teacher in worn dresses, not the woman cast aside like an afterthought. She stood tall, framed by the golden light pouring through the doorway, her midnight gown shimmering with every step. The sapphire earrings glittered like tiny stars catching the glow of chandeliers. Her hair fell in soft waves, her eyes steady, unflinching. And beside her, Alexander Knight. The crowd gasped. His presence alone carried the weight of empires. Known for his ruthless brilliance, Alexander was a man rarely seen at social events and never in anyone's shadow. Yet tonight he walked with Emma on his arm, his hand resting lightly but protectively at her back. Whispers rippled across the ballroom. "Is that Emma Lawson? Adrian's ex-wife? And she's with Alexander Knight? Impossible." Emma's heart pounded, but her chin remained lifted. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in her mind, the humiliation Adrian had planned for her. Yet now, the humiliation was nowhere to be found. In its place was power, dignity, and the unmistakable shift of attention in her favor. Adrian's glass froze midair. The smirk vanished from his lips, replaced by a pallor that crept across his face. Vanessa's smile faltered, her hand tightening on his arm like a claw. Alexander scanned the room with calm authority, acknowledging the stunned silence. Then, with a voice smooth as velvet, he addressed the master of ceremonies. "Forgive our late arrival. We had other priorities tonight." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Adrian's jaw clenched, rage boiling beneath his skin. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be small, broken, forgettable. Instead, Emma had arrived like a queen, commanding the gaze of every guest in the room. The orchestra stumbled back into melody, but the music seemed distant, drowned out by the pounding in Adrian's ears. Guests rushed forward to greet Alexander, their eyes darting back to Emma with awe and speculation. The once-forgotten ex-wife was now the centerpiece of the evening. Vanessa hissed under her breath. "What is she doing here? And with him?" Adrian forced a smile, though his hand trembled. "It's nothing. Just a stunt. She'll regret it." But even he didn't believe the words. He could see it in the faces of his peers, respect shifting away from him, curiosity sparking for her. His grand plan was slipping, thread by thread unraveling before his eyes. Emma, though terrified inside, felt a strange calm wash over her. She didn't need to speak. Her presence spoke louder than any words. For the first time in years, she wasn't defined by Adrian's cruelty. She was defined by her own strength, and by the man at her side who believed in her when she could not. Alexander leaned close, his voice low, meant only for her. "Breathe, Emma. They're the ones who should be afraid." And indeed, they were. Because with a single entrance, the power in the room had shifted, and Adrian Cole was no longer the master of his own game. Adrian's smile returned, but it was different now. Strained, brittle, the smile of a man losing control. He tugged Vanessa forward, guiding her through the murmuring crowd until they stood face to face with Emma and Alexander. "Well, well," Adrian drawled, his voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Emma Lawson, I wasn't sure you'd have the courage to come." Emma met his gaze steadily. The old Emma might have shrunk under the weight of his mockery, but not tonight. "You invited me," she replied calmly. It seemed rude to decline. The words, simple as they were, cut sharper than Adrian expected. A ripple of amusement moved through the crowd. Vanessa, desperate to recontrol, let out a laugh that sounded more like glass shattering. "You look nice," Vanessa sneered, her eyes sliding over Emma's gown. "I suppose thrift stores are improving their quality these days." Before Emma could respond, Alexander's hand rested lightly at her back. His voice, smooth and deliberate, carried across the room. "That gown is a custom piece, flown in from Paris. But you're right, quality is improving. It's why some people can almost pass for refined when they're not." The guests gasped, laughter bubbling in the corners of the room. Vanessa's face flushed scarlet, her mouth snapping shut. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Still hiding behind others, Emma? You couldn't handle this world when you were with me, and you can't handle it now. Showing up on another man's arm doesn't change who you are." Emma's heart pounded, but she held her ground. "And who am I, Adrian?" He leaned in, his words venomous. "A nobody. A poor little teacher who was lucky I noticed her at all." The cruelty hung in the air, thick and poisonous. For a moment, Emma felt the old sting of shame, the echo of nights spent wondering if he was right. But then she caught Alexander's gaze, steady, unwavering, and something inside her steadied. She took a breath. "If I was a nobody, Adrian, then why are you so rattled that I'm standing here?" The crowd erupted in whispers. Adrian's jaw tightened, but before he could answer, Alexander stepped forward. His presence was magnetic, his voice low but carrying weight. "You should be careful, Mr. Cole. The measure of a man isn't how loudly he can tear someone down, it's how he behaves when the world is watching." All eyes were on Adrian now, waiting for his retort. But for once, the words didn't come easily. He forced a laugh, trying to brush it off. Spoken like a man who doesn't know her history. Alexander's gaze sharpened. "On the contrary, I know enough to respect her, which is more than I can say for you." The tension crackled like a live wire. Vanessa clung tighter to Adrian's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. The crowd, once firmly in Adrian's corner, now watched with a mix of intrigue and unease. Emma stood tall, her fear fading with every second. She realized something profound. Adrian's power over her had never been real. It had only existed because she believed his lies. Tonight, in front of everyone, those lies were crumbling. Adrian, red-faced and seething, tried to rally. "This is my night, Emma. You're just a footnote." But his words fell flat, drowned out by the murmurs of shifting alliances, by the undeniable truth unfolding before them. Because for the first time, Adrian wasn't the one controlling the story, and he knew it. The orchestra swelled into a lively tune, but the air was thick with tension. Adrian Cole, his pride wounded and his ego cracking, wasn't ready to let Emma walk away with the upper hand. Not tonight, not in front of these people. He raised his champagne glass high, signaling for silence. The chatter faded, all eyes turning toward him. He smiled broadly, a mask that barely hid his simmering fury. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian began, his voice ringing with theatrical charm, "thank you for gathering tonight in support of such a worthy cause. This gala has always been about celebrating success, resilience, and most importantly, moving forward." Applause rippled politely through the room. Vanessa leaned against him, her smirk daring Emma to flinch. "And speaking of moving forward," Adrian continued, his gaze locking on Emma, "I'd like to acknowledge someone very dear to my past, someone who once played a small role in my journey." A murmur swept the crowd. Emma's stomach tightened, but she kept her head high. Adrian gestured toward her with a flourish, the spotlight swinging to capture her face. "My ex-wife, Emma Lawson." His tone dripped with condescension. "She's here tonight, and I must say, I'm touched she accepted the invitation. It takes courage, doesn't it, to step into a world that no longer belongs to you?" The room fell still. All eyes turned to Emma, waiting for her to crumble. Adrian's smile widened as he pressed harder. "Emma is, well, she's a school teacher. A noble profession, of course," he said, his voice laced with false sweetness, "but hardly the kind of partner who could thrive in this circle. I tried to bring her into this life, but some people simply aren't built for it." "Isn't that right, Emma?" Vanessa laughed lightly, adding, "We all have our limits." For a moment, silence pressed down like a weight. Emma could feel the sting of humiliation rising, the old familiar ache of being diminished. But before she could speak, Alexander's voice cut through the air like steel. "Enough." The single word silenced the room. Alexander stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You've had your fun, Adrian, but you've forgotten something important." Adrian blinked, caught off guard. "And what's that?" Alexander's eyes locked on him, unwavering. "Humiliating a woman doesn't make you powerful. It makes you pathetic." Gasps erupted across the ballroom. The sting of the words echoed louder than Adrian's toast. Guests exchanged shocked glances, some whispering, some nodding in quiet agreement. Emma's breath caught. Alexander hadn't just defended her. He had dismantled Adrian's entire performance with one sentence. Adrian's face darkened, his composure cracking. "You don't know her like I do," he snapped. Alexander smiled coolly. "On the contrary, I know enough. I know she's stronger than you ever realized, and I know that tonight she's not the one being laughed at." The room buzzed, the tide shifting visibly. Emma felt the weight lift from her chest as murmurs spread. Admiration, respect, even pity. But not for her. For Adrian. Vanessa tugged at Adrian's sleeve, whispering desperately, "Stop. You're embarrassing yourself." But Adrian couldn't stop. His pride was a wounded beast, lashing out. "This is my gala, my name on the banners, my money funding this cause. I built this life, and I won't let some washed-up ex-wife and her billionaire escort steal it from me." His voice cracked, too loud, too raw. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment his mask slipped completely. Emma stood straighter, her hands steady at her sides. For the first time, she realized she didn't need to say a word. Adrian had humiliated himself far better than he could ever humiliate her. And in that moment, the crowd began to see who Adrian truly was, a man crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. The morning after the gala, Emma woke to a storm. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. Messages, notifications, voicemails. It was a flood she hadn't expected. She sat up, rubbing her tired eyes, and opened the first headline. Adrian Cole's ex-wife returns, clings to billionaire for spotlight. Emma's stomach dropped. Another headline screamed, "Teacher turned gold digger, Lawson seen parading with Alexander Knight." The photographs were brutal. Shots of her stepping into the ballroom, Alexander's hand on her back, her gown shimmering like royalty. To Emma, it had been survival. To the tabloids, it was scandal. They painted her as a desperate woman clinging to power she didn't deserve. She scrolled further. Social media was merciless. Comments dripped with venom. She's just using him. She wants revenge. Typical ex-wife move. Each word sliced into her. For every kind stranger who defended her dignity, there were 10 voices tearing her apart. Emma set her phone down, her chest tight. She had thought she'd finally reclaimed her strength, that the humiliation Adrian planned had backfired. But now, it was worse. The whole city seemed to be laughing. A knock startled her. She opened the door to find her friend Lena, her arms full of groceries and her face pale with worry. "Emma, don't look at the news," Lena urged, setting the bags down. "They're twisting everything. Adrian's fingerprints are all over this." Emma sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "Of course they are. He couldn't beat me last night, so now he'll ruin me in the papers." Lena touched her shoulder gently. "You're not alone this time. You have Alexander." The thought brought a wave of conflicting emotions. Alexander had defended her with a single sentence, shifting the entire gala. But was she dragging him into a mess that could hurt his empire? He had billions, reputation, power, things she had never known. Why would he risk it for her? As Emma wrestled with doubt, Vanessa was already moving in the shadows. At a rooftop bar across the city, Vanessa sipped champagne, her phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, leak the photo," she ordered coolly. "The one where she's adjusting her dress, make it look like she's drunk, and spin the headline, 'Knight's New Lover Out of Control.'" She ended the call with a smirk. Adrian had been furious after the gala, his pride shattered, but Vanessa saw opportunity. If Emma was dragged through the mud, Adrian could spin himself as the victim, the man mocked by a desperate ex-wife chasing wealth, and Vanessa would play the loyal partner at his side. By evening, the new article hit. Emma's photo, twisted out of context, flooded every screen. The headline was cruel, the narrative sharper, Knight's charity tarnished by ex-wife's antics. Emma's phone buzzed again, this time with Alexander's name flashing. She hesitated before answering. "Emma," his deep voice carried urgency. "Don't believe a word of it. I know what this is. Adrian's desperate and Vanessa's feeding the fire, but I promise you, this storm will pass." Her throat tightened. "You don't understand. They'll drag your name through it too. You don't need this." There was a pause, then Alexander's voice softened. "Emma, I don't stand with you because I need to. I stand with you because I choose to." Tears burned her eyes. But before she could answer, another headline flashed across her phone. This one was worse than the rest. Exclusive. Custody battle brewing. Cole moves to prove ex-wife unfit mother. Emma's blood ran cold. Adrian wasn't just attacking her reputation anymore. He was coming for her son. And in that moment, Emma realized the fight had only just begun. The headline seared into Emma's mind. Cole moves to prove ex-wife unfit mother. Her hands trembled as she read the article. It painted her as unstable, irresponsible, a woman clinging to sympathy while neglecting her child. Old photos, ones Adrian must have dug up, showed her exhausted, carrying groceries with dark circles under her eyes. To the tabloids, they were evidence of her inability to provide. Emma slammed the laptop shut, her chest heaving. This wasn't just about her anymore. Adrian was threatening to take her son. At that moment, Lena rushed into the apartment, holding a manila envelope. "Emma, you need to see this," she whispered. Inside were legal documents. Adrian's petition for custody. His lawyers claimed Emma lived in inadequate conditions, that her modest income wasn't enough to raise a child, that her association with Alexander Knight proved she was unstable and reckless. Emma's knees buckled. She sank into a chair, clutching the papers like they might burn her hands. "He's trying to erase me," she whispered. First as his wife, now as a mother. Meanwhile, across town, Adrian sat in his office with Vanessa perched on his desk. He leaned back in his leather chair, smug satisfaction curling his lips. "She won't see it coming," he bragged. "The court will eat this up. A single mother in a dingy apartment? No judge will hand her custody." Vanessa traced a finger along his arm. "And when she's crushed, you'll finally be free. No more loose ends. Just you, me, and your empire." Back in her apartment, Emma's world spun. Her son's soft cries came from the next room, pulling her back from the edge of panic. She rushed to him, lifting his tiny body into her arms. His innocent eyes blinked up at her, trusting, unaware of the war raging around him. Tears blurred her vision. "I won't let him take you," she vowed, her voice trembling. "I don't care what it costs. I won't lose you." Later that evening, Alexander arrived. Emma tried to hide the documents, but he saw them immediately. His jaw tightened as he scanned the pages, his expression darkening with every line. "This is low even for him," Alexander muttered. "He's not just attacking you, he's attacking your child. That's unforgivable." Emma's voice cracked. "He has money, lawyers, influence. What do I have? A tiny apartment and a stack of bills. How can I fight him?" Alexander knelt in front of her, his hand covering hers. "You have the truth, and you have me." She shook her head, tears falling. "I don't want you dragged into this mess. You'll be smeared just like me." His gaze softened, unwavering. "Emma, I've faced ruthless men before. I've fought battles in boardrooms that made sharks tremble, but none of it matters compared to this. You're not alone, not anymore." For the first time, Emma allowed herself to lean into his strength. Her heart ached with fear, but beneath it, a fragile spark of hope flickered. Still, the war was far from over. Adrian's lawyers moved quickly, filing motions, leaking stories to the press, painting Emma as reckless and unfit. Paparazzi camped outside her apartment, snapping photos of her carrying her child, twisting every gesture into scandal. Emma felt trapped in a nightmare. Her dignity, her reputation, even her motherhood, all hanging by a thread. But deep inside, something hardened. Adrian had taken enough from her. He would not take her son. And as Emma prepared for the fight of her life, she didn't know that fate was about to hand her a weapon Adrian could never have predicted. Emma sat at her kitchen table, papers spread like landmines across the surface. Custody documents, news clippings, hate-filled headlines. Everywhere she looked, Adrian's shadow loomed. She traced her finger along the edge of one article, her stomach tight. How could she fight someone with his money, his lawyers, his power? The door opened quietly. Alexander stepped inside, carrying a leather folder. His expression was unreadable. His presence calm but charged with purpose. "I've been digging," he said, setting the folder down. "And I found something Adrian never wanted you to know." Emma blinked, confusion knitting her brows. "What do you mean?" Alexander opened the folder, sliding a set of documents toward her. "Your mother, before she passed, she invested in a small company. It's grown into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And guess what, Emma? The shares are in your name. You're not just a teacher scraping by, you're a majority shareholder." Emma's mouth fell open. "That's impossible. My mother, she never had money." "She didn't have much," Alexander explained, "but she was wise. She believed in that company when no one else did. And now, her belief has become your strength." Emma stared at the documents, her hands trembling. For years she had believed she was powerless, surviving on scraps while Adrian thrived. And now, this? "I can't believe it," she whispered. Alexander leaned closer, his voice steady. "Believe it. Adrian wanted you to think you were nothing. But you've been standing on hidden power all along, power he can't touch." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. The truth was overwhelming, almost too heavy to process. "But what does this mean for me?" "It means," Alexander said firmly, "you're not the poor, helpless ex-wife he's painting in court. You're a woman of means, a woman capable of providing for her child, a woman he underestimated." Emma covered her mouth, the weight of revelation crashing over her. For the first time, she saw Adrian's hold on her beginning to crack, not because of Alexander's wealth, but because of her own unexpected inheritance. But Alexander wasn't finished. He pulled out another sheet, a legal document signed years ago. "And there's more. Adrian drained your joint accounts before the divorce. That's embezzlement, Emma. We have the proof." Shock stole her breath. "He stole from me?" Alexander's eyes hardened. "Yes, and the same arrogance that pushed him to ruin you is going to destroy him in court. With these documents, we can challenge his custody claim and expose him for what he is." Emma's pulse quickened. For so long she had felt cornered, powerless against Adrian's cruelty. Now, for the first time, she saw a way forward. Not just to survive, but to fight. Her voice shook, but determination burned beneath it. "Then we fight, for my son, for the truth, for everything he tried to take." Alexander's gaze softened. "That's the Emma I see, the one he never could break." The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotion. Emma wasn't just a victim anymore. She was rising, armed with truths Adrian never expected her to discover. Outside, the storm of gossip still raged. Adrian's smear campaign still dominated the headlines. Vanessa still whispered poison into his ear, fueling his pride. But deep inside, Emma felt a shift. For the first time, she wasn't walking into battle with nothing. She had her dignity, her resilience, and now, proof of Adrian's betrayal. And as she looked at Alexander standing steadfast beside her, she realized the next round wouldn't just be survival, it would be war. Adrian Cole paced his penthouse like a caged animal. The city lights glittered outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, but their brilliance couldn't soothe him. He had expected victory by now. Emma humiliated, custody secured, his image untouchable. Instead, cracks were forming. The tabloids were starting to question his motives, and whispers of financial misconduct were surfacing. "Relax," Vanessa cooed, reclining on the leather sofa with a glass of wine. Her scarlet nails gleamed as she swirled the liquid lazily. "You're still the man everyone wants to be. Emma can't touch you." Adrian stopped, his jaw tight. "Don't underestimate her. She has Knight on her side now, and that man doesn't play games. He'll dig until he finds something." Vanessa smirked, tilting her head. "Then maybe you should worry less about Knight and more about me." Adrian frowned, his patience thinning. "What's that supposed to mean?" Vanessa rose, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she sauntered toward him. "You've been so obsessed with destroying Emma, you haven't noticed your empire slipping. Your accounts are bleeding money, Adrian, and guess what? I know exactly where it's going." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" She leaned close, her perfume heavy and sweet. "Let's just say I've been securing my future. You think I'd tie myself to a man who might lose everything? I'm not that stupid." Rage flared in his chest. "You're stealing from me." Vanessa laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Stealing? No. I call it compensation. For tolerating your arrogance, your rants, your pathetic obsession with your ex-wife. While you've been busy plotting Emma's downfall, I've been transferring assets, quietly, efficiently, and now I have enough to disappear if I want to." Adrian's hands clenched into fists. "You ungrateful? Don't." Her voice cut through his anger like ice. "You think you're untouchable, but you're not. Without me, you're just another man with a failing company and a ruined reputation. I gave you shine, Adrian. I gave you image, and now I'm taking what I deserve." Adrian's world tilted. The woman he had paraded as proof of his success was standing there ripping the mask away. "You can't do this," he snarled. Vanessa's smile widened. "I already have." She pulled her phone from her clutch and held it up, the screen flashing with account numbers and transfers. "See? By the time you realize how deep I've cut, it'll be too late. Maybe you should have treated me better. Or maybe," she paused, her eyes glinting with malice, "you should have never underestimated Emma, because all this started the night she walked back into that gala. She reminded everyone what you really are." The words struck like daggers. Adrian staggered back, fury boiling, but beneath it was fear. Real, gnawing fear. He had built his empire on arrogance and control, but now both were slipping through his fingers. Vanessa finished her wine in one elegant gulp and set the glass down with a sharp click. "I'm going to pack. By the time you figure out what to do, I'll be long gone." Adrian lunged forward, but she was already walking away, her laughter echoing down the hallway. Alone in the penthouse, Adrian stared at the glowing city beyond the glass. For the first time in years, he felt small, powerless, betrayed, and deep inside, he knew his empire wasn't collapsing because of Emma or Knight. It was collapsing because of the greed and cruelty he had cultivated himself. Adrian Cole wasn't a man who accepted defeat. Betrayed by Vanessa, mocked at his own gala, and cornered by Alexander Knight's quiet power, he felt the walls closing in. But there was still one card he believed he could play. One final blow that would crush Emma for good. He called a press conference. The ballroom at the Grand Regent Hotel filled with reporters, cameras flashing like lightning. Adrian appeared at the podium in his sharpest suit, the picture of composure. He adjusted the microphone and gave a practiced smile. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "There have been many rumors circulating about myself, my ex-wife, and her new companion. Tonight, I want to set the record straight." Emma sat at home, watching the live stream on her laptop. Her stomach knotted as Adrian's face filled the screen. She knew him too well. That smile meant venom was coming. Adrian leaned forward. "Emma Lawson, my former wife, is not the woman you think she is. Behind the polished gowns and billionaire escort, she is reckless, unstable, and unfit to raise our child. I tolerated her shortcomings for years, but now I can no longer remain silent. For the sake of our son, I must act." Gasps echoed through the room. He held up a stack of papers, waving them dramatically. "These are records, proof of her financial struggles, her inability to provide a stable home, and her erratic behavior. Ask yourselves, would you trust a woman like that to raise a child?" Emma's heart sank. He was twisting the truth, weaponizing her struggles, her hardest nights, against her. She closed her eyes, fighting the sting of tears. But then the live stream flickered. A new feed cut in. Alexander's voice filled the speakers. "Let me stop you right there, Adrian." The camera shifted, revealing Alexander Knight striding onto the stage, a folder in his hand. The room erupted in chaos, reporters shouting, cameras snapping furiously. Adrian froze, his composure cracking. Alexander stood beside him at the podium, his presence towering. "You speak of stability, Adrian. You accuse Emma of being unfit. But the truth tells another story." He opened the folder, pulling out documents and photographs. "Here are the bank records showing how you drained joint accounts during your marriage, embezzling funds for your secret life with Vanessa. Here are testimonies from business partners you defrauded. And here," he held up a printed email, "is your own written admission that you abandoned Emma because she wasn't rich enough for your image." The room exploded. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Adrian's face turned ashen, sweat glistening on his forehead. Alexander's voice thundered above the noise. "Emma Lawson raised her child with dignity and strength while you lived off lies. She didn't fail as a mother, you failed as a man." Emma's laptop screen blurred as tears filled her eyes. For years she had carried the shame of Adrian's cruelty, convinced the world would never see the truth. Now, here it was, unfolding live before everyone. Adrian stammered, his voice cracking. This is fabricated, but the damage was done." The cameras captured his panic, his denial, his mask shattering in real time. Alexander turned to the crowd, his gaze steady. "The world deserves to know who Adrian Cole really is, and Emma deserves to stand free from the lies that have bound her." The ballroom erupted again, but this time it wasn't in Adrian's favor. Reporters shouted accusations, cameras zoomed in on his crumbling facade. And across the city, as Emma clutched her son close, she realized something profound. Adrian hadn't just lost control of the narrative, he had lost everything. The fallout was immediate and merciless. Within hours of Alexander's reveal, headlines shifted. Adrian Cole exposed, fraud, betrayal, and greed. Charity gala star turns villain, caught embezzling funds. Ex-wife vindicated, Emma Lawson's strength inspires millions. Adrian Cole's empire, once polished to perfection, was crumbling before the world's eyes. Investors pulled out overnight, terrified of the scandal. Business partners distanced themselves, issuing cold statements about reviewing their relationship with Mr. Cole. Even the charity board released a statement condemning his actions, stripping him of his honorary position. The man who had strutted through galas and boardrooms now found every door slamming shut. In his penthouse, Adrian raged like a storm. He smashed glasses, tore papers, shouted into empty rooms. But no matter how loudly he roared, the silence afterward was deafening. Power was slipping away, faster than he could grasp. Vanessa stood by the window, scrolling through her phone, her perfect lips curved into a satisfied smile. "They're calling you a con man," she said sweetly, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "A fraud. A parasite. Quite the change from business genius." Adrian spun on her, his eyes wild. "This is your fault. You leaked those photos, you fed the fire." Vanessa laughed, tossing her phone onto the sofa. "Don't flatter yourself. You did this all on your own. I just made sure I wasn't buried with you." Adrian froze. "What do you mean?" She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "While you were busy plotting Emma's destruction, I was securing my escape. Accounts, assets, property titles, I've been siphoning them for months. And now, thanks to Alexander, your reputation is ash. No one will chase me. They'll chase you." Adrian's chest heaved, his fists trembling. "You betrayed me." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "No, darling, I survived you." She picked up her designer coat, slipping it over her shoulders with practiced elegance. "I'm meeting with someone tonight, a real investor, one who knows how to treat me like the prize I am. Don't wait up." Adrian lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. "You can't walk away from me." Vanessa's eyes turned cold. "Watch me." With a twist, she pulled free, leaving him grasping at air. Her heels clicked out the door, the sound of finality echoing in his ears. Alone, Adrian staggered back, sinking into a chair. His phone buzzed with messages, each one worse than the last. Lawsuits, investigations, friends cutting ties. His reflection in the glass wall looked like a ghost, hollow-eyed, broken. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't mask: fear. Meanwhile, across the city, Emma sat with Alexander in a quiet cafe, far from the noise of the scandal. Her phone buzzed with messages too, but hers were different. Notes of support, stories from strangers thanking her for standing tall, women who saw in her their own silent battles. She clutched her son close, her heart heavy but hopeful. Adrian's collapse didn't erase the years of pain, but it brought something she never thought possible: justice. Alexander's hand brushed hers gently. He's losing everything he built on lies. But you, Emma, you're finally free. She looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. Free and terrified. What if he still finds a way to hurt us? Alexander's gaze was firm, unwavering. Then he'll face me. Because men like him always underestimate the strength of those they try to destroy, and they always lose. And as Adrian's empire collapsed around him, Emma realized his downfall was only the beginning of her rise. Adrian Cole had always believed he was indestructible. But within days, his empire was rubble. Accounts frozen, lawsuits piling up, business partners fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. His name, once polished, envied, was now spat like venom in boardrooms and whispered with disgust in headlines. Still, Adrian refused to accept defeat. He sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by unopened bottles of whiskey and stacks of unpaid bills. The silence pressed in on him, broken only by the buzzing of his phone. Another notification, another article tearing him apart. Adrian Cole's mistress flees with fortune. Ex-wife vindicated while Cole faces investigation. He hurled the phone across the room, watching it shatter against the wall. Rage burned inside him, but beneath it, a darker truth festered. Fear. He was slipping into irrelevance, and nothing terrified him more. And so Adrian plotted. If the world wanted to see him as a monster, then he would be one. He would strike back at the person who had humiliated him most, Emma Lawson. Late at night, he called a reporter he knew, his voice slurred but sharp with malice. You want a story? I'll give you one. Emma Lawson isn't a saint. She's a manipulator. She trapped me, drained me, and now she's playing knight for his fortune. Print it all. The next morning, Emma awoke to another wave of headlines. Emma Lawson, gold digger or survivor. Her stomach clenched as she read Adrian's twisted words, turning her pain into performance. But this time, the reaction wasn't what Adrian expected. On talk shows, women defended Emma fiercely. She raised her child alone while he flaunted wealth. Don't call her a manipulator, call her strong. Online, strangers rallied behind her, tagging their posts with "Stand with Emma." The attempt to smear her backfired, painting Adrian as even more desperate. Still, Adrian pressed on. He stormed into his lawyer's office, demanding progress in the custody battle. I don't care what it takes, he snarled. I want her destroyed. I want my son. The lawyer, weary, sighed. Mr. Cole, you need to understand. Your chances are dwindling. With the evidence against you, with Knight's influence, and with the public tide turning. He hesitated. You're losing this fight. Adrian slammed his fists on the desk. Then I'll find another way. He left the office, consumed by obsession. The man who once thrived on charm and strategy now clung to desperation and vengeance. Meanwhile, Emma sat in Alexander's office, her hands trembling as she read the latest attacks. He won't stop, she whispered. He'll drag me down until there's nothing left. Alexander leaned forward, his eyes fierce. Then let him try. The more he lashes out, the more the world sees the truth. You don't have to fight him alone anymore. Emma swallowed hard, her heart torn between fear and resolve. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust the strength she was only just beginning to see in herself. But across the city, Adrian stared out over the skyline, his reflection fractured in the glass. His mind raced with schemes, each more reckless than the last. And in that dark silence, Adrian Cole made a vow. If he couldn't rise again, he would drag Emma down with him, no matter the cost. The storm Adrian Cole had unleashed was finally circling back to him. Every desperate lie, every smear campaign, every cruel move, it was all unraveling faster than he could control. It began with a leak, A whistleblower from his own company stepped forward, armed with emails and ledgers. The evidence was damning. Adrian had been siphoning funds for years, covering personal luxuries with company money, forging documents to keep investors blind. What Alexander had hinted at during the press conference was only the tip of the iceberg. Now, the whole rotten core was exposed. The media descended like vultures. Headlines screamed across every outlet. Adrian Cole's financial crimes revealed, fraud, embezzlement, and lies, the fall of a socialite king, from gala host to criminal defendant. Reporters camped outside his penthouse, cameras flashing as he stumbled in and out, his once perfect suits rumpled, his arrogance stripped away. The man who had built his empire on appearances was now a spectacle of disgrace. Meanwhile, Emma sat in Alexander's office, her son playing quietly nearby. She read the news in stunned silence. For years, Adrian had painted her as weak, unworthy, disposable. Now the truth was displayed for the world to see. He was the fraud, not her. "Justice has a way of catching up," Alexander said, sliding a cup of tea toward her. Emma shook her head, her voice thick with emotion. "I thought I'd never see this day. I thought he'd always win." Alexander's gaze softened. "He only ever won because you were fighting alone. Now he's facing the truth, and truth doesn't lose." Across town, Adrian faced the beginning of his reckoning. Federal agents raided his office, seizing computers and files. His lawyer tried to salvage dignity, but the mountain of evidence was insurmountable. Investors filed lawsuits, the charity board sued for misused funds, even former employees lined up to testify against him. And then came the final blow. Vanessa. She appeared on a primetime interview, dripping with foul regret. "I was blinded by his charm," she claimed, tears carefully painted across her cheeks. But Adrian was reckless, dishonest. "He used me, he used everyone." Adrian watched the broadcast from his crumbling penthouse, his fury boiling. The woman he once flaunted as his victory was now twisting the knife. "She'll pay for this," he muttered, but the words rang hollow. He no longer had the power to make threats stick. The court date was set. The world watched as Adrian Cole, once the golden boy of high society, was led into the courthouse in handcuffs. Cameras captured every step, the flashbulbs merciless, the jeers from the crowd echoing down the marble steps. Inside, prosecutors laid out the case. Years of fraud, stolen funds, financial manipulation. Witnesses testified, business partners, employees, even former friends. The story painted a man consumed by greed, willing to sacrifice anyone, even his own family, for the illusion of success. Emma was not called to testify, but she attended quietly, sitting in the back of the courtroom. She watched Adrian's mask crumble as each piece of evidence stacked higher. For the first time, she didn't feel fear. She felt release. The verdict was swift. Guilty on multiple counts, sentencing to follow. Adrian's face was pale, hollow, his arrogance extinguished. The man who once believed himself untouchable was now just another criminal awaiting his fate. Emma stepped outside into the sunlight, the crowd buzzing with the news. Alexander joined her, steady at her side. She drew a deep breath, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. For the first time in a long time, Adrian Cole's shadow no longer defined her. Justice had. For weeks after Adrian's arrest, Vanessa Lee floated through the city like nothing had changed. She posed for photographers, attended parties, and posted carefully curated photos on social media. With Adrian out of the picture, she believed she had escaped the wreckage. But illusions don't last forever. At first, whispers began. A designer publicly accused her of never paying for the gown she flaunted on the red carpet. A luxury boutique hinted that several of her purchases had been charged to Adrian's now frozen accounts. Soon, creditors came knocking. Without Adrian's money funneling into her lifestyle, the cracks spread quickly. One evening, Vanessa strutted into an upscale restaurant, expecting the usual attention. Instead, she was stopped at the door. "Your card was declined, Miss Lee," the hostess said gently, though her eyes betrayed pity. "Perhaps you'd like to settle your outstanding balance from last time before dining again?" Gasps rippled through the waiting crowd. Vanessa's cheeks burned as she stammered excuses, retreating into the night. The scene went viral within hours. Still, she clung to denial. She booked an interview with a glossy magazine, hoping to spin her image. Sitting in front of the camera, she donned crocodile tears. "Adrian ruined me," she claimed. "I was just another victim of his lies." But the interviewer wasn't sympathetic. "Miss Lee," he said sharply, "bank records show you transferred hundreds of thousands from his company into your personal accounts. Isn't it true you benefited from his crimes?" Vanessa froze, her perfect smile cracking. The article that followed was brutal. Vanessa Lee, mistress or accomplice. Brands cut ties, modeling agencies erased her from their rosters. Invitations stopped arriving. The doors that had once opened so easily now slammed shut. And then came the lawsuit. Adrian's investors, already hunting for restitution, discovered Vanessa's hidden accounts. She was named as a co-conspirator, accused of knowingly spending stolen money. The trial was merciless. While Adrian faced prison time, Vanessa faced public ruin. Her designer gowns, her jewels, her luxury apartment, all seized to repay debts. Paparazzi snapped photos of her leaving court in plain clothes, her once glamorous aura stripped away. One reporter shouted, "Vanessa, what do you have to say to the women you mocked?" To Emma Lawson, her lips trembled, but no words came. The same woman who once sneered at Emma in her scarlet gown now stood speechless, her empire of vanity reduced to dust. Meanwhile, Emma read the headlines with quiet disbelief. She hadn't wished this on Vanessa, not exactly, but she couldn't deny the sense of closure. For years, Vanessa had been the symbol of Adrian's betrayal, the polished replacement paraded before her. Now, the mask was gone. "She built her life on someone else's suffering," Alexander said gently as they read the news together. "And suffering always collects its debt." Emma nodded slowly. "I don't feel joy in her downfall, but I feel peace. It's over. She can't hurt me anymore." Alexander's gaze lingered on her, admiration softening his sharp features. "You've carried yourself with more grace than they ever deserved." For the first time, Emma smiled without heaviness. Vanessa's glitter had dimmed, Adrian's power had shattered, and the chains of the past were broken. And as Vanessa Lee faded into obscurity, the woman she once mocked stood taller than ever. Proof that true dignity can't be stolen, only earned. The city had changed. For years, Emma Lawson had walked its streets invisible, carrying her shame like a cloak. Now, when she stepped outside, people didn't look at her with pity. They looked at her with respect. The scandal that destroyed Adrian and Vanessa had birthed something unexpected. Emma's story became a symbol. Newspapers wrote of her resilience, talk shows invited her to speak, and women across the country sent letters thanking her for showing that survival was possible. Strangers approached her in cafes, not with scorn, but with gratitude. "You reminded us that dignity matters more than diamonds," one woman whispered, pressing Emma's hand with tears in her eyes. Emma still taught children part-time, but now she also used her newfound voice to advocate for single mothers. She worked with charities, sharing her journey openly, not as a victim, but as a survivor. The hidden inheritance her mother had left her allowed her to create a foundation, one dedicated to helping women rebuild their lives after betrayal. And by her side, always, was Alexander Knight. At first, Emma had doubted him. She had wondered if he pitied her, if their bond was built on his strength covering her wounds. But over time, she saw the truth. Alexander didn't see her as fragile. He saw her as equal. He admired her courage, her stubborn grace, the way she refused to let life crush her spirit. One evening, as the sun dipped over the city skyline, Alexander led her to a quiet rooftop garden he had restored. Lanterns glowed softly, flowers perfumed the air. "This place was abandoned," he said. "Forgotten. Everyone thought it was beyond saving, but I believed it still had life in it. I feel the same way about us, Emma." Her breath caught. For years she had been discarded, called unworthy, forgotten. Now here was a man who didn't just see her scars, he cherished them. "I don't need you to save me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know," Alexander replied, cupping her face gently. "That's why I love you. Because you saved yourself. I just get the privilege of walking beside you." Tears slid down Emma's cheeks, but they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of release. She leaned into him, letting her walls fall. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe in love again. Not the fragile illusion Adrian once offered, but something real, something built on respect and truth. Months later, Emma attended another gala. This time, not as a shadow, not as someone waiting to be mocked. She stood on stage as the guest of honor, presenting her foundation's first scholarship to a young single mother. The applause thundered, echoing through the grand hall. In the audience, Alexander watched with pride, his gaze fixed on her like she was the only light in the room. Emma caught his eyes, her lips curving into a quiet smile. Adrian was gone, Vanessa forgotten. Their cruelty had burned them to ash. But Emma had risen, not in spite of her pain, but because of it. She spoke her closing words with steady conviction. To every woman who has been told she is not enough, remember this: you are not defined by who leaves you, but by how you rise when they do. Strength is not found in the diamonds on your wrist, but in the fire in your heart. And when the world tries to break you, stand tall, because no one can steal your dignity unless you hand it to them. The crowd rose in a standing ovation. And in that moment, Emma Lawson was no longer the poor ex-wife. She was the queen of her own life. So the story comes to a close. My wonderful friends, you're still here with me, aren't you? If you've stayed until this moment, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a way words alone can't explain. And maybe, just maybe, Emma's fight was not only her story, it's yours too. Life will hand us betrayals, heartbreak, and nights where it feels impossible to keep going. But as the Stoics remind us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Emma thought she was powerless, yet every step she took revealed her strength. She didn't win because life was easy. She won because she refused to let pain define her. And here's the lesson for us: dignity, resilience, and love cannot be stolen unless we give them away. When the world tries to break you, remember Marcus Aurelius's words: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If this story gave you hope, or even a tear of healing, then don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe so more hearts can find light in these stories. Because together, we rise stronger.